Good evening, and thank you for joining Cure Childhood Cancer for our web-based learning event for patient families affected by childhood cancer. Cure Childhood Cancer is a nonprofit organization dedicated to conquering childhood cancer through funding targeted research and supporting patients and their families. As a way to support families, Cure has launched a webinar series that will address the unique needs of families affected by childhood cancer. Please check our website, www.curechildhoodcancer.org regularly to learn more about upcoming web-based learning. My name is Karen McCarthy, Patient Family Services Manager at Cure Childhood Cancer, and I have the pleasure of being your host this evening. Before we begin, please note all incoming audio will be muted until the question and answer portion of the webinar. If you are using a computer camera, you can stop videoing of yourself by unclicking the camera icon next to your name in the participant panel. To remove the video box from your screen, hover your mouse over the down arrow on the left of the video box and click. If you are viewing from a computer, take this time to enlarge your viewing screen by clicking on the full screen button. For this webinar, Cure has partnered with Ginger Armstrong, School Program Coordinator of Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and Keely Bailey, Licensed Clinical Social Worker and Registered Play Therapist. Ginger Armstrong is the School Program Coordinator for Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. After 16 years in the traditional classroom as a middle and high school math teacher, she began working at Children's in 2009, supporting students with cancer and other medical conditions. She currently leads a team of 13 teachers at both Eggleston and Scottish Rite hospitals, addressing the academic needs of patients in kindergarten through 12th grade. Keely graduated from Florida State University with both her bachelor's and master's degree in social work. She has been licensed in the state of Georgia for 15 years. With over 10 years of experience in the early intervention and educational field, she is experienced in working with children from a variety of backgrounds. Keely was a Cobb County school social worker for 7 years and is familiar with the educational system. Her office is located in East Cobb near Roswell, Georgia, where she sees children and adolescents as well as their parents to promote strong and healthy families. Keely is a Cure Network therapist provider serving Cure Childhood Cancer patients and their families. Thank you, Ginger and Keely, for both being here.
So on our agenda for the evening, we'll be talking about how to advocate for your child's academic needs. Some of the topics we'll be discussing is planning for your child's return to school, educational challenges resulting from illness or treatment, special education services and special accommodations, educational support outside the school setting, and then we'll have a time for questions and answers. So when talking about planning for your child's school return, the first thing that you need to think about is why is school still important? As teachers in the hospital, one of the things that we often talk about with both our patients and the families is that we want to make sure that, even though they're going through this diagnosis and treatment process, that they understand that on the other end, they still need a good education. On top of that, kids often will be told by teachers, school administrators, don't worry about it right now. We'll just wait until you feel better to worry about school. And that actually places undue stress on children sometimes because they're thinking, is there something that they're not telling me? And I want to make sure that, that I still need to go to school and that I still do get that education so that I can go on with life once my treatment is over. It's really important to make sure that you talk with the medical team for your child and make sure that you are on the same page with them about what school is going to look like and how school is going to happen for your child. A lot of our providers at Children's are very, very much encourage kids to continue to go to school as often as possible. It's a great way for them to have a good sense of normalcy throughout their treatment journey. But it's also important to understand when they should be staying at home. So it is very, very important to talk with the medical team to make sure that you are on the same page with that. And then also to make sure that you meet with the key school personnel so that they know what to expect and what to look for. Not only the child's teacher, but guidance counselor, principal, school nurse, any other key people that work with your child at school need to be up to speed on what to expect and what to pay attention to and what to look for and notify you about during the journey. So the next thing we're talking about is some educational challenges resulting from illness and treatment. It is relatively common that children will have some lasting effects either during or after treatment for cancer. The brain is a very complex structure, and it continues to grow and develop throughout childhood and adolescence. So some problems may not become apparent until years after their therapy is completed. A lot of this depends on what age they were when they started treatment and when they were going through various treatments for cancer, and how long those treatments lasted, and then also what type of protocol that they're on. Some of the common challenges that we see in the school setting are memory and processing issues, planning and organization, problem-solving skills, social skills, handwriting, spelling, reading, vocabulary and math, concentration, attention span, and the ability to complete tasks on time. A lot of these roll together into what school personnel, what you may hear them call it as executive functioning skills, where they're able to make decisions, plan for something, and then carry out that plan. The next screen, what we're looking at now, are comparing different educational plans. Two common plans that you'll hear about are 504 plans and IEPs. And while this is kind of small, there is a version of it. You'll see a link at the bottom of the screen where it's choa.org/school. If you go to that website and scroll down all the way to the bottom, there's a tab for helpful resources. And this is there as well as others. They're available to print out. You can use them as needed. But this kind of compares the IEP plan, which is an individualized education plan, and a 504 plan. They are two separate plans. The IEP provides for a special education experience at school. The 504 plan is to provide your child with equal access to their education. So it's not changing what they learn, but it is giving them equal access to it. It goes through quite a few different specific things in this chart. An IEP gives special education that's unique to each child. So they're getting a truly individualized plan for each child. And the child is eligible for an IEP if they fit into one or more of the 13 disabilities listed in IDEA. Learning and attention needs do qualify. Their disability must affect their educational performance. So that you do actually have to show that there is an educational performance problem before they will qualify for an IEP in most cases. For a 504 plan, you're equalizing the access to education. So it may be that they just need accommodations that make it easier for them to still receive the same information that the other children are receiving. They can have any disability. It may include learning and attention needs, but it also may include physical differences or things like that. Parents can ask for an IEP and ask for the school to test their child. You can also ask for the school to provide for independent testing to be done, but they don't have to agree to that. The school system can test your child there in the school and say that that's all that they will accept. They won't accept outside testing. Both also for a 504, if parents get outside testing done, the school may or may not honor that. Often, if your child is being seen through our hospitals at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, the schools are very appreciative of the fact that the testing has already been completed in the hospital and will definitely accept that. On both of these, the team that is involved includes teachers, administrators, special ed personnel, and the parent. And it's very important to remember that parents are a big part of that team because you know your child and you are seeing all of the pieces of the child, not just what's going on at school. So it is very important to be able to speak up and advocate on behalf of your own child during these IEP meetings. In the plan, there will be different things that we'll talk about in a little bit more in depth in just a minute, with accommodations and modifications depending on which type of plan your child has. Again, with an IEP, you are changing what's expected of the child from a curriculum standpoint or from what they're expected to learn. For a 504 plan, you're just modifying their education so that they have equal access to it. So that can range in all kinds of different ways, both in the actual content of what they're learning for the IEP. For a 504 plan, it can be as simple as giving them access to an elevator if they have a physical limitation that wouldn't allow them to make it to a certain class or something. And then what parents need to do, you need to make sure that you request that your child be tested. A team of people will come together and evaluate all different areas of what's going on with your child and then make a decision with you included on what the best plan for your child is to support them appropriately. The bottom part on there says how often is it reviewed? It can be reviewed. It has to be reviewed at least one time a year, but it can be reviewed as often as you request it. So if you have a plan in place and you don't feel like it's meeting your child's needs, absolutely speak up and ask for another meeting, because it can be reviewed as often as you feel it needs to be. The child must be reevaluated every 3 years, which means full testing done again. So not only do you need to meet once a year, but they do need to be retested every 3 years. There's no charge for either of those services. The difference in where money comes in is that additional funding is given to your school for an IEP, and it is not for a 504 plan. So if the child requires anything that involves extra funding, say a one-on-one nurse to travel with them from class to class, or a paraprofessional to go with them, OT, PT, speech services on top of what they would regularly receive in school, all of those would need funding, which means that they would need to be required through an IEP as opposed to a 504 plan. And then underneath that, there are supports and services that are unique to each child's needs. We're going to talk a little bit more about those more in depth, but they're similar but not exactly the same. And so we can move forward to those. Basically, for the two plans, the way we refer to it when simplified terms, when expressing this to parents in the hospital for the first time, is that a 504 has accommodations that level the playing field. We want your child to have the same opportunity to receive their education as any other child would. An IEP modifies the field they're playing on. It modifies the expectations for the child as needed so that they can still be successful in school.
Our next section begins to go through the specific accommodations and modifications that might be options for your child. We divided these up into what they might address, or the issues that a child might face returning to school. The first area we cover is addressing endurance and fatigue. So some ideas and strategies that are helpful would be shortening assignments to emphasize mastery and limit repetition. That can look like a variety of things, but it can include chunking assignments, as it's called, where they can only do the top half of a page, or evens or odds, but demonstrating that they understand the concept instead of having to do every question. Having extra time to complete work and tests, including standardized tests, is another option. In order to have extra time on standardized tests, they have to use the extra time in the classroom on regular tests and quizzes. So that's something to consider with the standardized testing. The extra time to make up missed assignments is a good option so that they're under less pressure to catch things up when they're out. Providing the student with a copy of lecture notes and handouts is great so that they have less pressure in the classroom to have to keep up with everything that's going on and always have a copy if they are out for a treatment or not feeling well. Allowing them to be able to record lectures and class discussions is a good way for them to be able to go back and listen to what's going on in addition to having the copy of what was reviewed in class. The next slide goes over providing the student with large print text on all reading and writing assignments, allowing the student to dictate written assignments to a scribe rather than having to type them out or write out assignments. Again, showing mastery versus having to do the assignment just as the other students did them. Also, with allowing students to take tests orally, we're demonstrating mastery of the concepts and allowing them to still be able to participate with the class. Providing a second set of books at home is helpful so that they don't have to bring their books back and forth, but also with the executive functioning and the planning skills so that if they forget a book, then they have the option to be able to have the book at home to keep up with their work. Or if they aren't anticipating being out, they would have the books at home to keep up with their work. The next slide, we talk about more accommodations and modifications related to social support. And these include permission to wear a hat or a head covering, which is often against dress code at schools, but perhaps having a note, a path that they could show school personnel with planning in advance that this would be an acceptable accommodation. Use of the school elevator, wheelchair, crutches, a walker. Along with that, sometimes bringing a crate to carry their stuff so that they don't have to carry it in their hands is another accommodation that might require discussing with your administration. Allowing the student to change classes before gives them a few minutes to get ahead of the crowd and allows them extra time to be able to make it to their destination before the halls are crowded. Providing the student a peer buddy to walk with would support them in that transition and with getting their supplies where they need to be. The last area with this specific accommodations and modifications is addressing the health and treatment schedule. It's possible that you might have to work with intermittent hospital homebound instruction, which we're going to get into more in a minute, but the hospital homebound attendance requirements for absences are due to medical appointments and illnesses. We'll explain more. The partial day attendance, when necessary, would allow them to not have to comply with the Georgia compulsory attendance law as far as their school attendance. And a system for providing advance assignments to the parents for absences due to planned medical appointments, which would allow the student to be able to stay on top of their assignments or even get ahead at times when they're feeling better to keep up with their work. The last one is a system providing makeup assignments in a timely manner when a patient is absent due to illness or hospitalization. And it's important for parents to make sure that they're advocating for their child and following up with teachers when there are gaps in assignments and the student is unable to be in attendance at school. Okay, the next ones that we're going to talk about are possible IEP modifications that might be necessary if you were to have a direct parent referral from your request and take that step to pursue an IEP instead of the 504. The school can provide occupational, physical therapy, and speech therapy as long as the goals that they are working on impact academic success. So the goals related to those therapies have to impact the academics rather than transitioning or communication unless it is related to the academics. Providing skilled nursing care, as is recommended by the medical team, which will involve, again, you making sure that you're using your whole team to determine what is the best route for your child. Providing a one-on-one parapro, as recommended by the medical team, and as will be required for academic impact to help the child throughout the day. Lowering the reading level of assignments and tests, limiting choices on multiple choice questions, and providing word banks or formula banks to allow them to have more opportunity to see the choices rather than have to come up with those on their own. Changing the grading criteria to be based on the IEP goals. So looking at the child's abilities and potential in order to assess what grading is appropriate for them.
So one of the things that was talked about in possible modifications and accommodations was hospital homebound services. And there are two different ways that that can happen. If your child is able to attend school at all, then you can have intermittent services, which means that the student is expected to miss a total of 10 days during the school year or more, and it has to be related to their medical condition. The student is able to attend school when they're medically able and then receive homebound services when they're medically unable. So if they were able to go to school part of the time, but they have planned admissions, treatment, things like that, but they are still able to go to school, then they would receive intermittent services. This is what most of our students and patients are receiving during treatment is intermittent because, again, most of the physicians do want kids to still continue to be a part of their school community and receive that social interaction, if nothing else. The intermittent homebound requirement by the state of Georgia requires that for any day that they miss, that they are to receive 36 minutes of instructional time. Many school systems are willing to do more than that to make sure that they stay caught up, but that's what they're required to do. If a child is not able to go to school at all and needs to receive full-time hospital homebound services, then they would receive a total of 3 hours of instruction per week for the weeks that they miss due to their specific medical condition. When looking at hospital homebound services, first question is, how does my child qualify? And it always has to be medically necessary. A doctor has to say, this child is going to miss school for their medical condition more than 10 days. There's a referral form that has to be filled out and signed by the physician. And if you are in the hospital at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta with us, we can definitely help with that process and will help with that process. But it does have to be medically necessary. One of the things that does come up frequently with our oncology patients particularly is that how long does that last? Well, it lasts as long as the doctor says that you're medically unable to attend school. So one question that frequently comes up is, especially with our, typically with teenage girls, is I don't want to go back to school until my hair grows all the way back. And unfortunately, that is not medically necessary. So they are going to encourage the kids to go back to school and come up with a plan so that they feel comfortable at school during that process too. The next question is, what is the process? Well, if you are not being seen and have an educational advocate through the hospital that's working with you, then you can always go to the school. We typically recommend that your school counselor is the first point of contact, because even if someone different within the school handles hospital homebound, they would be able to direct you to the correct person. There are some forms that have to be filled out by the physician, and then each school system handles it slightly differently, but you'll be matched up with a teacher either at your child's school or within your school system that will then become a homebound teacher. Depending on the grade, some school systems match different teachers depending on subject. Typically in the elementary grades, you'll have one primary teacher that is the only one that works with your child. Once they get older and their subjects are more specialized, some of the school systems will assign more than one teacher so that they make sure they're getting someone who is comfortable in all the different subject areas. And as a parent, the way you can initiate it is literally just go to the school and say, my child has been diagnosed with, this particular condition, and we're going to need hospital homebound services, and I need to move forward. Again, if you're in the hospital or if you're being treated at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, then we absolutely will help you with that process, and you just need to let somebody know that you'd like to talk to a school teacher. So for resources, again, as I mentioned earlier, on the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta webpage, our school program, we are building a resource library and adding to it frequently right now. It is at www.choa.org/school. There are resource pages down at the bottom, but there's also other information on there about what to do if you are in the hospital or if you need our help. And then there are specific resource pages under the helpful resources link that go into a little bit more detail based on diagnosis and some other things there. There's also a sheet there about hospital homebound and what to do with that. The Health Law Partnership is also a very valuable resource. It is exclusive to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta patients, and it is a team of legal experts who can help you with any problems that you're having related to your child's medical condition. They are absolutely experts in school law as well and can help you with any problems that you're having there. A common accommodations list is listed there. Understanding the 504 and IEP and the differences between, there's a link there. And then links to the Georgia IEP forms through the Department of Education website.
Thank you, Ginger and Keely, for helping us understand how to best advocate for a child's academic needs after a cancer diagnosis. Participants will now have the opportunity to ask Ginger and Keely questions. If you're attending this webinar without a microphone capability on your computer, you can ask your question by typing it into the chat box located under the participant tab. But right now, we will unmute all lines to take any questions you may have. We are ready for questions if you have any. Okay. So this concludes our webinar on advocating for your child's academic needs. This webinar will be housed on the CURE website at www.curechildhoodcancer.org for future reference. We look forward to continuing to support you on your journey with childhood cancer. Thanks and have a good night.